When I survey the wondrous cross, on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and for content on all my pride, and for content on all my pride.
No visitor's trip to London is complete unless he's been to hear Chalk Farm Band.
There's hardly been a Sunday in the last 100 years when the Chalk Farm Band of the Salvation Army hasn't assembled outside its Citadel headquarters in North London. Brass band music is a proud tradition in the Army, and many corps boast a band. But the Chalk Farm Band is among the most famous of them all, and it probably has the most colourful history of them all. After all, this was the band that played before King George at Buckingham Palace, played before the Pope at the Vatican, marched down the Mall in the 1995 VJ Day Parade, and this was the band whose world tours have even included Australia and Tasmania. But banding is not all about high-profile engagements. It's about marching the streets, taking the Christian message out to the people.
All the music that's written for Salvation Army bands is written, again, with the basic cause of spreading the message. There was always a message of some sort in there. Even what people would loosely call classical music is still there. There's something, even if it is just to draw attention, just to attract, because once you've got people's attention, then you can start talking, you can start telling them about the love of God and helping to spread the word.
When we present concerts, when we are on the march, then we recognise we are portraying the Salvation Army, we are witnessing for Jesus. And as such, you know, then the very professionalism, almost, the persona of the band switches to being that of excellence, that of the best for the highest.
As they march through the streets of Camden Town, the musicians of the Chalk Farm Band know they're following in famous footsteps. After the Christian Mission became the Salvation Army in 1878, founder William Booth soon recognised the value of attracting attention when taking the message out to the people. And what better attraction than a brass band?
William Booth, when he accepted the idea, recognised that this was a means of conveying the gospel, even through the instrumentation that they used. And so they were not just playing crotchets and quavers and semi-breeze, they were playing words through their instrument. And so they were able to convey the messages of the songs that were being sung in Salvation Army services. And to witness, this was the great thing, to witness in the open air, and to speak as well as to play.
Here is Pam.
In the words of the second verse of our song this morning, here are the words. It tells me of a Saviour's love who gave his life for me.
At a given point, they would put their instruments down and tell the people what the Lord had done for them and invite them to come and seek him for themselves as a means of Christian experience.
Well, I hope you enjoy our music. Most importantly, I hope you enjoy the message that we bring to you. For God is love, Saviour's name.
Oh, how I love the Saviour's name. Oh, how I love the Saviour's name, the sweetest name on earth.
So, when the Chalk Farm Corps was opened in 1881, it was only a matter of months before its own brass band was formed. Just as today, they marched the streets of North London, inviting sinners back to services at the Citadel. But for the Chalk Farm Band, it quickly became a tenet of faith that they should spread the gospel further afield. For the past 30 years, the main bandmaster has been Michael Clack, MBE. A distinguished musicologist, he has the role of honing the musical skills of the bandsmen and setting the repertoire for concerts, marches and performances. He had a formidable reputation to live up to when he took over a band that was already preeminent within the Salvation Army. After its formation in 1882, the Chalk Farm Band went through 4 bandmasters in a dozen years. What they needed was continuity and inspiration. In 1894, they found it in the person of a 24-year-old player, A.W. Punchard. For almost 50 years, he was to lead and inspire. And it was his ambition to extend the name of the band outside the confines of Chalk Farm that led to its international reputation.
His record of service as the bandmaster of Chalk Farm Band was so marked that in 1921, our general at that time, Bramble Booth, made him the territorial bandmaster. He became the bandmaster for the whole of Britain. And what he had experienced in Chalk Farm Band and the success that he had had here was repeated all the way around the country. And through that, his influence spread all the way around the world.
And it was a recognition of AWP's extraordinary reign that, in 1934, the Chalk Farm Band was invited to play before the King and Queen at Buckingham Palace.
Pictures of the band marching down the Mall, went in through the gates and playing in the forecourt. It was, went right round the Salvation Army world. Punchard went in and was interviewed by the King and the Queen, King George V and Queen Mary. Which often the bands that go to Buckingham Palace, they don't actually, the Queen's not usually there. But on this occasion, the King and Queen were there and actually came and spoke about the band and the playing. Yeah.
Today, under Michael Clack's tutelage, the Chalk Farm Band is at home in grand venues such as the Albert Hall.
Let's greet, please, the Chalk Farm Band.
Much of its success is due to the quality of the musicianship and the quality of the music it plays. The Chalk Farm Band premiered many of the great works of the Salvation Army's most famous composer, Eric Ball.
Everybody has to be of the same mind, listening to what's going on, and obviously the person in the middle, wielding the baton, needs to have a certain amount of aim musically. So there's not just notes, but you're making music, and the aim of all that is then to assist the message of the Salvation Army.
Today, bands travel from all over the world to take part in the great international festivals. But it wasn't always so. In the early days, travelling away from home cores was a major undertaking. Again, it was the vision of A.W. Punchard that first got the Chalk Farm Band on the road.
The first trip they made, longer than a weekend, was known as Punchard's Dream. He talked about this. It was only to Scotland, which seems laughable now, but he worked out a 10-day tour of Scotland.
That first trip to Scotland in 1902 was followed quickly by visits to the West Country and to Ireland. Motor coaches or charabancs soon became the main means of transport, though they were notoriously prone to breakdowns. By 1906, the Chalk Farm Band had ventured into Europe, playing in Holland and Germany. During the 20s and 30s, they visited Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Germany, France and Austria. Punchard's Dream set the pattern for later tours, like the 1988 visit to Australia and Tasmania. But perhaps most memorable was the grueling 1967 whistle-stop tour around the continent. As usual, the band assembled outside its headquarters before setting out. In Punchard's day, it was usually a train to a Channel port and then the cross-Channel ferry. By the 1960s, though, it was off to Southend Airport for quick goodbyes on the tarmac before watching England disappear behind them. This tour was to take in Belgium, France, Switzerland and then down to northern Italy and on to Rome, where a major surprise was in store. A visit of this length would be prohibitively expensive if everyone had to pay for their own hotels, so the tradition is that bandsmen are greeted by local Salvationists in each town they visit and then billeted with individual families before assembling to march through the streets and hold open-air services. And they also get together for sightseeing and meals. And while ice creams may be on the menu, the teetotal Salvationists can't sample the local wines. Since the earliest tours, the Chalk Farm Band has kept a good photographic record of its travels. But on the 67 European tour, one bandsman went to a lot of trouble to make this 8mm film of the proceedings. It became an invaluable record when they left Turin for the Italian capital.
We'd been on the road for nearly a fortnight, travelling through Belgium, France and Switzerland. So we were pretty worn out the time we got down to Rome.
People were getting off a coach in St. Peter's Square, and an Australian voice came over very strongly to me and said, I never thought I would see a Salvation Army band here in this square. And that about summed it up. We hadn't been there before. No one like us had been there before.
We were always a bit flummoxed as to how the Pope knew we were in Rome on that particular weekend, those particular days. But when we arrived, apparently the local headquarters had received a summons for the band to play on the Thursday, and that threw everybody in a panic. And they were phoning up General Coots over here to say, well, you know, is this on or not? Obviously the ecumenicalism wasn't all that advanced at the time in 1967, and they'd had very little contact with the Roman Catholic Church.
We marched into the side, went through the several corridors, corridor after corridor, to the Benedictine chapel, and the monsignors were very busy saying, well, we want you to play something very bright. when the Pope comes in. So we played the Invincible Army.
And there was this vast crowd in the Benedictine chapel. And one of the conditions was, the general insisted on, was that the band sang O Boundless Salvation, the Founder's song. And I suppose that was one of my memories, to hear the band actually singing O Boundless Salvation to all this Roman Catholic crowd and the Pope sitting on his throne.
O boundless salvation, deep ocean of love, the fullness of mercy Christ brought from above, the home of redeeming, so rich and so free, now flowing for all men, now flowing for all men, now flowing for all men, come roll over me.
Lieutenant Colonel Brindley Boone and myself, we were ushered onto the dais, and the Pope greeted us. And he spoke generally to all the pilgrims, about 3,000 pilgrims or so gathered there, to say, well, it is music that can bring us together. Even our different religious inclinations can be brought together in this way today, and we welcome the Chalk Farm Band, which was, of course, very nice.
And then, of course, as they brought him down the aisle before the band, he sort of blessed the flag. They called the flag, and he sort of blessed it, and out he went. Now, that was quite a coup.
Despite the excitement of playing for the Pope, the band still had work to do, making its way home through Switzerland and France. The problem of billeting in Paris was solved when they took over a barge on the Seine, normally reserved for homeless men, who really became homeless that night.
What struck me about the tour was, as it was completed and we were going over the tarmac, as one did in those days, to the aircraft at Orly Airport to come home, one of the bandsmen that had travelled the world with Punchard, of course he was quite a senior bandsman at that point, came to me and fell in step with me as we were going up to the plane, and said, well, Michael, I'd like you to know that in all the years that I've played in the band, he played in Berlin, Prague, all the countries of Europe, along with Punchard, I would like you to know this is the finest tour that I've been on.
The work of the Chalk Farm Band is not all grand tours and big concerts. Sometimes there are more prosaic tasks to perform.